Hi guys, and welcome back to day 16 of Inktober. So in my, I think it was 2 videos ago, I asked for you guys to give me input on topics you'd like me to talk about, and I saw one that was a really good idea. They asked about my career path and basically how I came to ending up being an illustrator and using YouTube as the backbone basically of my career and how that became my choice career. And if it always was the choice that I wanted to take. And it's a great question because I think the huge part of being able to turn art into a career is adaptability and being able to look at your particular style of art, your circumstances, and what you want to do with it and turning it into the career that best suits you, because there really isn't a roadmap for taking art from where you're at to a solid career. There's a lot of things you can look up online, and trust me, I search for them, but there's not going to be something that says this is exactly what you do and bam, you're going to have a job. This is it. That's the path you can take. So it can feel really daunting to look at it and not know where to begin and where to go. But for me, my path is very unique, just as anyone else's in the art career usually is. They usually find their path by circumstances that happen to them, as well as them adapting to what they decide is right for them. So I'll go ahead and talk a little bit about my progression from that. So I did always know that art was going to be my career since I was a kid. And honestly, in some ways, I kind of feel like that was a little bit bad, because never for 1 second did I even think of other career options. It was just 100%. I was going to be an artist. There's no other choices involved. So I never actually considered or weighed the options. And that is one thing that I do wish that I could have done. Not necessarily that I wish at this point that I had a different career, but I just feel like if I had been a little bit more thoughtful about it from when I was younger, say in high school even, I would be able to have a stronger standing in where I'm at now. So if there's any takeaway, I would say start planning and figuring out what course you want to take now. Be thoughtful of it. Be aware of what benefits come with it, as well as what negatives, and ultimately make a good career path for yourself, a plan. But like I'm going to talk about, for me, it was not a straight shot. For me, I always knew that I wanted to be an artist, like I mentioned, and going in from middle school to high school and working through high school, I felt that I really wanted to be an animator. I wanted to go work and be in a studio environment and be able to create these amazing feature films, the kind of things that you watch and you feel all this emotion for, and it's really exciting. And that was what was exciting for me at the time. And I ended up going to a couple different state colleges. I bounced around a lot. I needed to get better grades after high school, and I went to a couple colleges that were easy to get into, and I got those credits. And ultimately, they were only colleges that didn't have an illustration degree or an animation degree. They only had graphic design degrees. So I knew that wasn't the right school for me. So I ended up transferring, and I found a school that had a pretty good illustration program. There were pretty good alumni from there that were doing great things. So I ended up going there. I went to this illustration program, which is not what I needed for animation, really. I mean, there are people who get into animation with no degree, so it's not that was absolutely not going to take me to that path. But I wasn't very focused on where I was going and what I needed to do to get there, and I was not focused in my art either. Looking back now, none of my art was well suited for the kind of career that I was planning or thinking about, and I think deep down I knew it. I wasn't really pushing myself to get really good at concept art or the kind of things that really develop and are used for development in films or in video game studios, that kind of thing that I wanted to get into. I wasn't working that way. I was working in a very illustrative way, which is obviously ultimately the path that I do end up taking. But when I was finally in college and I was working on this and I was looking at the people around me and seeing people with their plans, and they had these great goals and they knew what they were going to do, but there were also people who had absolutely no plans and no goals. And I was starting to realize that I had these things that I was saying were my plans or saying were my college, or not my college, my career path goals, but I wasn't doing anything behind it to support it. I was only saying those things so that it would give me intention. It would make me look like I knew what I was doing, but I didn't know what I was doing at all. So it was this very realizing moment where it hit me that I didn't know what I was going to do, and I didn't know what I was going to do when I got out of college, and I didn't know how I was going to make money, and I knew that I was not on the path to get an animation job, and I have several things in my life that I wouldn't be able to live in a lot of those places, honestly. So I needed to be able to have a career that I could live in other places besides where there are these animation studios. That couldn't really be as much of a pull as I would have liked it to be. And that's when it made me realize that I needed to start adapting my plans and really just figuring it out. What am I going to do and what am I best at and what are the things that I get the most enjoyment out of? And I also needed it to be something that I could begin working on right now while I was in college. I was absolutely terrified of finishing up and then just having nothing, having no structure, no plan, no building blocks for my career. So ultimately, I went to the internet, which is the backbone of most artist careers nowadays, because it does allow you to be very independent as far as pushing yourself to being able to get jobs, getting clients, getting people to find your work. So of course I went to the internet, and this is going to be a very roundabout long story, but I started looking into ways that I could start posting my art. Okay, this is the scary part, is I didn't even have any social presence at all at that point. I didn't put any of my work online at all. And if you're listening to this and you want a career in art, start doing it now. You need to start building that basis of people who know who you are and find your work. You need to start building that now. That will be a huge benefit, and you're going to wish that you had started much earlier. But at that point, I had not done it yet because I was still thinking that I was going to just go off and get this job with my portfolio, which also is not how it works for animation either. Anyways, so I was ready to start getting a social presence, and I started with Tumblr, and I absolutely hated it. It just felt like this void. It felt pointless to put these posts on there of my artwork because it felt like I was just sending it off and no one would see it and it wouldn't matter and it wouldn't make any effect at all. And that's when I started considering seriously YouTube. I loved watching other artists create art on YouTube, and it was a huge resource for me for a long time, and I always envied these artists that created these amazing works on there. And I definitely needed a little push from my husband. He was very, very supportive of me starting to push my career that direction and starting to really figure that out in very concrete ways. So he was very helpful for me to be able to actually get over my fear of starting YouTube and doing it. And honestly, I would never have guessed growing up that this would be eventually the path that I would take. I was a very shy kid when I was younger. I was very secluded and closed off. I did not want people judging me or looking at me, so I would be the one who would sit in the corner and just be alone. And so now the fact that my career is based on putting my artwork and my face up there, it is kind of a surprise when I think back at it, but it is also incredibly fulfilling for me. It's the most satisfying avenue for me to be able to put my work up there. I love being able to interact with you guys and to be able to talk about my work as well as the process. It just feels so much more dynamic. So ultimately, that just really clicked with me at the time. I loved creating these speed paints. I loved working in that avenue. So I just started putting a lot of my time into that. I did most of my class assignments as YouTube videos, and it was a slow grind at first. It was not an immediate success by any means, but It was a couple years where I was just building it up, and eventually it started to feel like it could be viable, like it could be a path that would work for me. And yeah, that's a little bit of the long story of how I transitioned from having these plans of what I was going to do with my career that weren't actually thought out plans, and then turning them into actual real steps to take to become a self-employed artist, which is very satisfying for me. It's something that I'm very grateful for every single day. And I can just take a moment and give all of you guys a huge thank you, because you guys are what makes it possible for me to be able to make art every day and put as much time as I do into my pieces. It makes me feel really grateful for the outcome and how things have turned out and my life and where it's at now. It feels like I just have so much to grow and so much to learn, and that's really exciting and happy for me. So I think ultimately the takeaway is that if you're thinking about art as a career, I highly suggest just beginning to think about it as a very business-oriented thing. Think about it in concrete steps. What can you do to take yourself from where you are now to getting a job, or where you are now to being self-employed? And I think that would have really benefited me, is to really just start nailing down what are concrete things that I can do to become a self-employed businesswoman. That's what it needs to be. And when I did finally come around to thinking that way, it just gave me all the power that I was lacking up until that point. And that is it for today's Inktober. I do have the original available. There's a link in the description as well as in the end card. And I have lots of other prints and art stuff there. So if you'd like to own any of that and help support me, that is a great way. And I do post daily Inktober videos, so I'll be back tomorrow with another one. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.